In the 19th century, Europe was undergoing a radical transformation. Amidst the tranquil landscapes, a revolution was brewing, a revolution of ideas, of philosophies that would change the course of history. Karl Marx was born on May 5, 1818 to Heinrich Marx and Henriette Pressburg. He was born at Bruckengasse 664 in Trier, an ancient city then part of the Kingdom of Prussia's province of the Lower Rhine. Marx's family was originally non-religious Jewish but had converted formally to Christianity before his birth. His maternal grandfather was a Dutch rabbi, while his paternal line had supplied Trier's rabbis since 1723, a role taken by his grandfather Meyer Halevi Marx. His father, as a child known as Herschel, was the first in the line to receive a secular education. He became a lawyer with a comfortably upper-middle-class income, and the family owned a number of Moselle vineyards, in addition to his income as an attorney. Prior to his son's birth and after the abrogation of Jewish emancipation in the Rhineland, Herschel converted from Judaism to join the State Evangelical Church of Prussia, taking on the German forename Heinrich over the Yiddish Herschel. Largely non-religious, Heinrich was a man of the Enlightenment, interested in the ideas of the philosophers Immanuel Kant and Voltaire. A classical liberal, he took part in agitation for a constitution and reforms in Prussia, which was then an absolute monarchy. In 1815, Heinrich Marx began working as an attorney and in 1819 moved his family to a 10-room property near the Porta Nigra. His wife, Henriette Pressburg, was a Dutch Jew from a prosperous business family that later founded the company Philips Electronics. Her sister Sophie Pressburg married Lion Philips and was the grandmother of both Gerard and Anton Philips and great-grandmother to Fritz Philips. Lion Philips was a wealthy Dutch tobacco manufacturer and industrialist, upon whom Karl and Jenny Marx would later often come to rely for loans while they were exiled in London. Little is known of Marx's childhood. The third of 9 children, he became the eldest son when his brother Moritz died in 1819. Marx and his surviving siblings, Sophie, Hermann, Henriette, Louise, Emily, and Caroline, were baptized into the Lutheran Church in August 1824, and their mother in November 1825. Marx was privately educated by his father until 1830 when he entered Trier High School, whose headmaster, Hugo Wittenbach, was a friend of his father. By employing many liberal humanists as teachers, Wittenbach incurred the anger of the local conservative government. Subsequently, police raided the school in 1832 and discovered that literature espousing political liberalism was being distributed among the students. Considering the distribution of such material a seditious act, the authorities instituted reforms and replaced several staff during Marx's attendance. In October 1835, at the age of 16, Marx traveled to the University of Bonn wishing to study philosophy and literature, but his father insisted on law as a more practical field. Due to a condition referred to as a weak chest, Marx was excused from military duty when he turned 18. While at the university at Bonn, Marx joined the Poets' Club, a group containing political radicals that were monitored by the police. Marx also joined the Trier Tavern Club drinking society where many ideas were discussed, and at one point he served as the club's co-president. Additionally, Marx was involved in certain disputes, some of which became serious. In August 1836 he took part in a duel with a member of the university's Borussian Corps. Although his grades in the first term were good, they soon deteriorated, leading his father to force a transfer to the more serious and academic University of Berlin. In October 1836, Marx arrived in Berlin, matriculating in the university's Faculty of Law and renting a room in the Mittelstrasse. During the first term, Marx attended lectures of Eduard Gans, who represented the progressive Hegelian standpoint, elaborated on rational development in history by emphasizing particularly its libertarian aspects, and the importance of social question, and of Karl von Savigny, who represented the historical school of law. Although studying law, he was fascinated by philosophy and looked for a way to combine the two, believing that, without philosophy nothing could be accomplished. Marx became interested in the recently deceased German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, whose ideas were then widely debated among European philosophical circles. During a convalescence in Strelov, he joined the Doctors' Club, Doctor Club, a student group which discussed Hegelian ideas, and through them became involved with a group of radical thinkers known as the Young Hegelians in 1837. They gathered around Ludwig Feuerbach and Bruno Bauer, with Marx developing a particularly close friendship with Adolf Rutenberg. Like Marx, the Young Hegelians were critical of Hegel's metaphysical assumptions but adopted his dialectical method to criticize established society, politics, and religion from a left-wing perspective. Marx's father died in May 1838, resulting in a diminished income for the family. Marx had been emotionally close to his father and treasured his memory after his death. In 1843, Marx became co-editor of a new, radical left-wing Parisian newspaper, the Deutsch-Französische Jahrbucher, German-French Annals, then being set up by the German activist Arnold Ruge to bring together German and French radicals. Therefore Marx and his wife moved to Paris in October 1843. Initially living with Ruge and his wife communally at 23 Rue Vanneau, they found the living conditions difficult, so moved out following the birth of their daughter Jenny in 1844. Although intended to attract writers from both France and the German states, the Jahrbucher was dominated by the latter, and the only non-German writer was the exiled Russian anarchist collectivist Mikhail Bakunin. Marx contributed 2 essays to the paper, Introduction to a Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right, and On the Jewish Question, the latter introducing his belief that the proletariat were a revolutionary force and marking his embrace of communism. Only one issue was published, but it was relatively successful, largely owing to the inclusion of Heinrich Heine's satirical odes on King Ludwig of Bavaria, leading the German states to ban it and seize imported copies. Ruge nevertheless refused to fund the publication of further issues, and his friendship with Marx broke down. After the paper's collapse, Marx began writing for the only uncensored German-language radical newspaper left, Vorwärts. Based in Paris, the paper was connected to the League of the Just, a utopian socialist secret society of workers and artisans. Marx attended some of their meetings but did not join that in Vorwärts. Marx refined his views on socialism based upon Hegelian and Feuerbachian ideas of dialectical materialism, at the same time criticizing liberals and other socialists operating in Europe. Unable either to stay in France or to move to Germany, Marx decided to emigrate to Brussels in Belgium in February 1845. However, to stay in Belgium he had to pledge not to publish anything on the subject of contemporary politics. In Brussels, Marx associated with other exiled socialists from across Europe, including Moses Hess, Karl Heinzen, and Joseph Wedemeyer. In April 1845, Engels moved from Barmen in Germany to Brussels to join Marx and the growing cadre of members of the League of the Just, now seeking home in Brussels. Later, Mary Burns, Engels' longtime companion, left Manchester, England to join Engels in Brussels. Temporarily settling down in Paris, Marx transferred the Communist League executive headquarters to the city and also set up a German workers' club with various German socialists living there. Hoping to see the revolution spread to Germany, in 1848 Marx moved back to Cologne, where he began issuing a handbill entitled The Demands of the Communist Party in Germany, in which he argued for only 4 of the 10 points of the Communist Manifesto, believing that in Germany at that time the bourgeoisie must overthrow the feudal monarchy and aristocracy before the proletariat could overthrow the bourgeoisie. On June 1, Marx started the publication of a daily newspaper, the Neue Rheinische Zeitung, which he helped to finance through his recent inheritance from his father. Designed to put forward news from across Europe with his own Marxist interpretation of events, the newspaper featured Marx as a primary writer and the dominant editorial influence. Despite contributions by fellow members of the Communist League, according to Friedrich Engels, it remained a simple dictatorship by Marx. Marx moved to London in early June 1849 and would remain based in the city for the rest of his life. The headquarters of the Communist League also moved to London. However, in the winter of 1849 to 1850, a split within the ranks of the Communist League occurred when a faction within it led by August Willich and Karl Schapauer began agitating for an immediate uprising. Willich and Schapauer believed that once the Communist League had initiated the uprising, the entire working class from across Europe would rise spontaneously to join it, thus creating revolution across Europe. Marx and Engels protested that such an unplanned uprising on the part of the Communist League was adventuristic, and would be suicide for the Communist League. Such an uprising as that recommended by the Schapauer or Willich group would easily be crushed by the police and the armed forces of the reactionary governments of Europe. Marx maintained that this would spell doom for the Communist League itself, arguing that changes in society are not achieved overnight through the efforts and willpower of a handful of men. They are instead brought about through a scientific analysis of economic conditions of society and by moving toward revolution through different stages of social development. In the present stage of development, following the defeat of the uprisings across Europe in 1848, he felt that the Communist League should encourage the working class to unite with progressive elements of the rising bourgeoisie to defeat the feudal aristocracy on issues involving demands for governmental reforms, such as a constitutional republic with freely elected assemblies and universal, male, suffrage. In other words, the working class must join with bourgeois and democratic forces to bring about the successful conclusion of the bourgeois revolution before stressing the working class agenda and a working class revolution. After a long struggle that threatened to ruin the Communist League, Marx's opinion prevailed and eventually, the Schapauer group left the Communist League. Meanwhile, Marx also became heavily involved with the Socialist German Workers' Educational Society. The society held their meetings in Great Windmill Street, Soho, central London's entertainment district. This organization was also racked by an internal struggle between its members, some of whom followed Marx while others followed the Willich faction. The issues in this internal split were the same issues raised in the internal split within the Communist League, but Marx lost the fight with the Schapauer or Willich faction within the German Workers' Educational Society and on September 17, 1850 resigned from the society. Despite facing persecution and exile, Marx remained steadfast in his beliefs, continuing to write and advocate for a world free from exploitation and inequality. Marx and von Westphalen had 7 children together, but partly owing to the poor conditions in which they lived whilst in London, only 3 survived to adulthood. Their children were Jenny Caroline, Jenny Laura, Edgar, Henry Edward Guy, Jenny Evelyn Francis, Jenny Julia Eleanor, and one more who died before being named. According to his son-in-law, Paul Lafargue, Marx was a loving father. In 1962, there were allegations that Marx fathered a son, Freddie, out of wedlock by his housekeeper, Helene de Muth, but the claim is disputed for lack of documented evidence. Marx was afflicted by poor health, what he himself described as the wretchedness of existence, and various authors have sought to describe and explain it. His biographer Werner Blumenberg attributed it to liver and gall problems which Marx had in 1849 and from which he was never afterward free, exacerbated by an unsuitable lifestyle. The attacks often came with headaches, eye inflammation, neuralgia in the head, and rheumatic pains. A serious nervous disorder appeared in 1877 and protracted insomnia was a consequence, which Marx fought with narcotics. The illness was aggravated by excessive nocturnal work and faulty diet. Marx was fond of highly seasoned dishes, smoked fish, caviar, pickled cucumbers, none of which are good for liver patients, but he also liked wine and liqueurs and smoked an enormous amount, and since he had no money, it was usually bad quality cigars. From 1863, Marx complained a lot about boils. These are very frequent with liver patients and may be due to the same causes. The abscesses were so bad that Marx could neither sit nor work upright. In later life, whilst working on Das Kapital, Marx suffered from a trio of afflictions. A liver ailment, probably hereditary, was aggravated by overwork, a bad diet, and lack of sleep. Inflammation of the eyes was induced by too much work at night. A third affliction, eruption of carbuncles or boils, was probably brought on by general physical debility to which the various features of Marx's style of life, alcohol, tobacco, poor diet, and failure to sleep, all contributed. Engels often exhorted Marx to alter this dangerous regime. In Siegel's thesis, what lay behind this punishing sacrifice of his health may have been guilt about self-involvement and egoism, originally induced in Karl Marx by his father. Following the death of his wife Jenny in December 1881, Marx developed a catarrh that kept him in ill health for the last 15 months of his life. It eventually brought on the bronchitis and pleurisy that killed him in London on March 14, 1883, when he died a stateless person at age 64. Family and friends in London buried his body in Highgate Cemetery, London, on March 17, 1883 in an area reserved for agnostics and atheists. George Eliot's grave is nearby. According to Francis Wheen, there were between 9 and 11 mourners at his funeral. However, research from contemporary sources identifies 13 named individuals attending the funeral: Friedrich Engels, Eleanor Marx, Edward Aveling, Paul Lafargue, Charles Longwet, Helene de Muth, Karl Skorlemer and Ernest Radford. A contemporary newspaper account claims that 25 to 30 relatives and friends attended the funeral. Today, Marx's ideas continue to shape the world we live in, inspiring movements for social justice and equality across the globe. From the halls of academia to the streets of protest, Marx's legacy lives on, a beacon of hope for a better tomorrow. For Karl Marx, the revolution was not just a dream, it was a reality waiting to be realized.